I don't play with lions. I don't play with those. I don't even do roller coasters. Wow.
Well, hello.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and you guys are in for a treat. We've got a 2-hour show, deeply researched, ready to go. We're going to talk about things in historical context, which I think is really important in order to understand the current moment that we're in, especially as it pertains to foreign policy. So later in the first hour, we're going to dive into something that I've referenced in various interviews. It's referred to as the Greater Israel Project. And in order to kind of understand what the varying ideologies are when it comes to the Zionist movement, I think you need to know about what the Greater Israel Project is. So we're going to talk about that in the first hour. We're also going to check in with our good friend, Mark Levin. And by good friend, I mean someone I absolutely loathe because he has used an editor's note in the New York Times as a way of minimizing the absolute catastrophic situation in Gaza as we speak, the starvation that continues. We're gonna give you all the details on that. In the second hour, which I will also be hosting solo today, Cenk Uygur is out for the day. We're gonna talk about some other stories, including what Nancy Pelosi has to say in regard to allegations that she herself is engaging in insider trading. We're going to talk about Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's claims that one of the provisions in the so-called Big Beautiful Bill was really a backdoor way of privatizing Social Security. Is there any truth to that? We're going to dive into that as well. So lots of stories to get to. As always, just want to encourage you to like and share the stream if you're watching us live. It's a free and easy way to help support the show. You can also support us by becoming a member by going to tyt.com/join. Becoming a member helps us stay afloat, independent from corporate influence. And more importantly, you get all sorts of perks, including our daily bonus episodes that we reserve for members only. All right, without further ado, let's get into our first story.
People are dying in Gaza. These children that are starving and dying.
I have a Washington Post article right here. More than 60,000 lives lost in Gaza. Toll collated by Enclave's health ministry is likely to be an undercount. The health ministry is run by Hamas. They keep using these Hamas numbers. Then they list thousands of children who have been killed.
They look like everyday Americans. This child is picking up noodles off the ground with his bare hands because there was no food left. So he's picking up noodles to put into his backpack.
There is widespread man-made famine gripping Gaza as we speak. Hundreds of Palestinians have already died due to starvation. This is a fact. And if people like brain rot, addled Mark Levin don't believe the numbers coming out of the Gaza Strip in regard to the death toll, best way to confirm the death toll is to allow investigators in, to allow journalists in. But of course, Israel is refusing to allow journalists to go into the Gaza Strip and do reporting on the ground. The only reason why any state would essentially close off access to journalists is because they don't want journalists to see what's going on. And to be quite frank, I also do not believe the death toll that's being reported by the Gaza Health Ministry. I think it is an undercount. I think far more people have been killed. I think there are still bodies trapped under the rubble. I believe that there are hundreds of thousands of people who are currently missing in Gaza. And if they're missing in Gaza, there's a pretty good chance that they're dead. So there will come a day when the Gaza Strip will open up and people will get to see what Israel has carried out, the mass slaughter that Israel has engaged in. But for the purposes of this discussion, I want to focus on these efforts to essentially discredit claims that there is a starvation campaign taking place in the Gaza Strip headed by the Israeli government, carried out by the Israeli Defense Forces. Now, sadly, these diehard Israel defenders are using a correction in the New York Times. It's an editor's note at the very bottom of a piece in order to discredit whistleblowers and reports proving that Israel is in fact engaging in an intentional starvation campaign in Gaza. So for those who want to read the piece for themselves, it is titled "Gazans Are Dying of Starvation." It's in the New York Times. It's a pretty good piece. And at the very bottom, there is an editor's note in regard to one child that was profiled in the piece. There are many children who are profiled in the piece, but they write that this article has been updated to include information about Mohammed Zakaria al-Mutawak, a child in Gaza suffering from severe malnutrition. After publication of the article, the Times learned from his doctor that Mohammed also had pre-existing health problems. Now, two things obviously can be true at the same time. That child could have a pre-existing condition and could also suffer from starvation as a result of the ongoing famine in Gaza. But in no way does that editor's note discredit the claims that are being made about what's happening on the ground in Gaza. But of course, you're gonna have people like Mark Levin grab onto that and use that to discredit those who are actually genuinely concerned that American taxpayers are being forced by our government to fund atrocities that are being committed in Gaza as we speak. How's your healthcare working out for you, Americans? Oh, you weren't able to save anything for your retirement? Oh, that's too bad. We're, of course, providing the bombs and the ammo and all of the weapons necessary to commit mass slaughter in Gaza. Aren't you happy about that? Aren't you so happy about that? Obviously, the Times didn't just use the story of one person or one child to, prove that widespread starvation is beginning to claim the lives of Gazans, especially Palestinian children. So Dr. Al-Faraka, this is from the same piece, Dr. Al-Farah, said the number of children dying of malnutrition has risen sharply in recent days. He described harrowing scenes of people too exhausted to walk. Many of the children he sees have no pre-existing medical conditions, he said, giving the example of Sawar Barak, who was born healthy and now at 11 months old should weigh about 20 pounds, but is under 9 pounds. Hollow-eyed, skeletal children languish on hospital beds or are cared for by parents who gaze helplessly at protruding ribs and shoulder blades and emaciated limbs resembling brittle sticks. The haunting scenes are a stark contrast to the plenty that exists just a few miles away across the borders with Israel and Egypt. In fact, there are some Israelis who have taken it upon themselves to do celebratory barbecues right at the border of Gaza. You'll see videos of that if you look it up online. It's just too disgusting for me to share with you. I didn't want to do it. Then you have former Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar. He's been making his rounds. He's been speaking to the press, and I'm so happy he's doing it because he was one of the individuals who was contracted by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to provide humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza. He thought that it was going to be a noble cause, but once he actually went to Gaza to carry this out, he realized, oh, this actually isn't about delivering humanitarian aid. These are death traps. When UNRWA was able to operate in Gaza and deliver humanitarian aid, they literally had hundreds of aid sites for Palestinians to go to for help. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has 4, and they are placed intentionally in active combat zones. He detailed the story of a little boy by the name of Amir on Tucker Carlson's podcast, complete with documentation. Take a look.
Young little boy. His name is Amir. All he had in his arms was a small bag of rice, half a bag of flour, some lentils that he had picked up from the ground. He didn't have much. And we thought maybe he was asking for more food or maybe he was hurt. And we notioned him over. And he came up and he extends his right hand at us. And so I kind of walked up to him and waved him over. And the guy standing next to me, this young boy, grabs holds his hand and he kisses it. And then he comes to me and he holds my hand and he kisses it. In Arab culture, that is a very significant sign of respect. The gentleman that was standing next to me was also a military veteran, combat veteran. So he's been to Afghanistan, Iraq, and he understands. He was moved by it. He was touched. I was touched. He was very emaciated. He had no shoes on. His pants were tattered. He had a kind of a rope or string holding his pants up. Filthy. Probably hasn't bathed in months. Probably hasn't eaten in days. I put my arm on his left shoulder, and I look at him. And I can feel the bones in his shoulder. I can feel the weakness in his arm. I can feel the vulnerability. I can feel the desperation. And I look at him and I got down on my knees, or I'm looking at him in the eyes. And then I say to him, I said, people care. America cares. You're not going to be forgotten.
You know, one of the things that I'm grateful for in this entire disastrous situation is that there are some brave people like Aguilar who are willing to speak out. But more importantly, what he does in the clip that I just showed you is he helps to humanize people who have been actively and intentionally dehumanized through propaganda campaigns, through disgusting commentary that passes as expert analysis here in the United States. So what exactly became of Amir? What happened to him and where is he now? You're about to find out.
So the IDF are shooting at the crowd that's leaving. As the crowd left and they would hit the Marag corridor to go west, the IDF would shoot at them, shoot at their feet, shoot over their head. We would shoot at them, shoot at their feet, shoot over their head, shoot into the air. And the bullets start hitting off the ground. There's video of this. It's on the BBC video. Hitting off the ground, see dirt flying up, and I see the shooting keep going on, like just the rap, and Palestinians dropping on the side of the road. So Amir didn't make it home. He was killed by the IDF. Why? Because they lack discipline, they lack standards, and they lack basic human decency.
Well said. So evidence and stories like these do not stop scumbags. And I mean that with my whole chest, okay? I'm saying it with my whole chest. Scumbags like Mark Levin and Chris Cuomo, by the way, from furthering their pathetic propaganda to provide cover for Israel's atrocities and war crimes. That is what is currently taking place. That is the reality of the situation. If it weren't the reality of the situation, journalists would be free to operate and do their jobs in Gaza to document what's happening. There's a very intentional effort to prevent the documentation of what's happening. It's not at all a coincidence in my mind that more than 200 journalists have already been killed in Gaza. And I'm sorry, I mean, Israel just announced not too long ago that they're conducting a ground invasion in Deir al-Balah. And it's interesting to me that the death toll has kind of stood still at like around 60,000. I don't believe for a second that 60,000 is what the death toll actually is. I think it's much higher. Now, even though the New York Times provided an editor's note to essentially provide more context to their reporting on one of the kids, just one of the kids, Chris Cuomo thinks that's not enough. He believes that the Times should pay a price. They have been in jihad mode for a long time in a lot of ways. Chris, I think you have been in Nazi mode, justifying the mass slaughter of innocent people because what? I don't know. Are you on Epstein's list? What's going on here? What is up with this unwavering commitment to a foreign government, even as it commits atrocities? And he invited me on his show next Monday. I look forward to speaking with him. I hope he doesn't cancel. Israel, according to Cuomo, should pay no price at all for their mass slaughter, but the New York Times should, of course, yeah. And as for Levin, he's already made clear on multiple occasions that he doesn't care much about the safety and lives of minors. Here's one example.
We can't waste our time on Epstein and other stuff that are going on here that some people want us to focus on. I'm about had it with all that stuff. We better focus on who we are, what we're doing, where we want to take the country.
Yeah, you've about had it with all that stuff. I'm sure you have, Mark. I'm sure you have. Mark Levin should go live in Israel. He clearly values Israel far more than the United States of America. So since that is the case, and he has proven it on almost every single one of his broadcasts, he should go live in the beautiful state of Israel and leave Americans alone to focus on their own country instead of funding genocidal campaigns in the Middle East. And what about Israel's announcement this week that they're carrying out 10-hour tactical pauses in 3 locations in Gaza in order to distribute humanitarian aid? Sounded like they turned a new leaf, right? Well, if you've been following this conflict long enough, if you've been following this genocide, you would know that you shouldn't trust anything that comes out of Israel's mouth. You just shouldn't. Because every single time they say they're going to do something good, they turn around and do the opposite. The UN humanitarian agency, OCHA, said that 4 days into Israel's tactical pauses, people were still dying from hunger and malnutrition alongside, get a load of this, casualties among those seeking aid. So people are still getting shot and killed as they go to humanitarian aid hubs in search of food. Israeli forces killed at least 30 people when they opened fire yesterday on Wednesday on a crowd waiting for humanitarian aid in the north of the Palestinian territory. Is anyone really surprised at this point? I mean, seriously. Additionally, in that same attack, 300 people were wounded. And this is a territory, let me remind you all, where every single hospital has been bombed. So where do all the people who are severely wounded, where do they go for help? There's been a blockade on not just humanitarian aid. We're talking about badly needed medical equipment. There are videos all around the internet showing IDF soldiers going into hospitals and intentionally destroying equipment that's necessary to save people's lives. Gee, I wonder why they would do that. You know, when the Armenian genocide was happening, these types of denials were taking place in the world, in the international stage. Oh, it's not a genocide, it's not a genocide, not a genocide, not a genocide, not a genocide. It would take, the United States over 100 years to finally acknowledge that 1.5 million Armenians were slaughtered? And why did it take the US so long to do that? Well, of course, we're an ally to Turkey. Turkey doesn't want to acknowledge the Armenian genocide. And Turkey also happens to be a NATO ally of ours. And it is disgusting to me that not only is our taxpayer money funding what's happening right now, this injustice, this slaughter, we're engaging in denialism as we speak. As an American, I am so ashamed of that. And I wish I had some power to control it, some power to make a change here. But this has been an ongoing campaign chipping away at our government for many decades. And I don't believe our government serves the American people. I believe our government is fully occupied at this point because clearly it's far more interested in serving a foreign country, even as it's carrying out atrocities. Mohammed Abu Salmiya, director of Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, said his facility had received 35 bodies from the shooting that I had referenced earlier, the one in which they believed around 30 people had died. But he received 35 bodies from the shooting, which reportedly struck about 3 kilometers or 2 miles southwest of the Zikim crossing point for aid trucks entering Gaza. The IDF said it conveniently had no knowledge of casualties in the incident, but they do admit to opening fire at starving people. The Israeli army said that dozens of Gazans were seen gathering around aid trucks in northern Gaza and in close proximity to IDF troops operating in the area. Why are the aid centers located in active combat zones when the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Foundation is an Israeli-backed organization that's funded to the tune of $60 million by the American people, by the way? Israel has full control over this, full control. So tell me, why exactly are these aid centers specifically located in active combat zones. So you can shoot and kill innocent people as they're seeking aid and then claim, oh, they got too close to IDF soldiers in combat. It is so easy to dismantle their lies. It's so easy to see what's happening on the ground. The troops fired warning shots in the area, not directed at the gathering, in response to the threat posed by them. They're unarmed. Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank are unarmed. They don't have guns, they don't have bombs. They're skin and bones, and they're desperate for food. They're so desperate that they will literally risk their lives to get a bag of lentils. These people are scum. Absolute, complete, utter scum. Hours earlier, 14 Palestinians were killed in 4 other incidents, 3 near aid distribution sites, the Civil Defense Agency said. In 2 of the incidents, the Israeli army said it had fired warning shots. Warning shots typically don't result in death. These warning shots do, which leads me to believe they're not actually warning shots. They're death traps. Anthony Aguilar called them death traps. Anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together can see that they're death traps. People are being intentionally slaughtered. But hey, we live in America where we have had decades of brainwashing about how the real threat to American safety are those dirty Muslims. It's time to really ask yourself who the bad guys are. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. Let's read some comments. That story was really hard to produce, by the way. Little Mac McGee says, oh, I would bet all I own that the death count is exponentially higher than what is being reported. Yeah, I totally agree. There's so many people missing, hundreds of thousands. Anyway, Art Guy says, double extra special surprise Anna solo hours. We're not worthy. You're really sweet. Thank you. I love that some of you guys like the solo hours. Others don't. Bear with me. I'm doing my best. It's the summertime. People are on vacation. People are having a good time. It is what it is. All right, let's go to, although I don't know what Cenk is up to be fair. That guy never vacations, really. He's even working on vacations. Django Dragon says, yay, Anna all day. Bring the salt. I have been. Let's go to Michael Napin, who says, 2 hours of Anna solo. That's amazeballs. Thank you. Navinik says, Alyssa Slotkin went on Colbert, and their YouTube clip comment section was flooded with how much of a great job Breaking Points did. People see through Slotkin as Pete with a pixie adjacent cut. That's not funny, okay? No good, sorry ass corporate Democrats can no longer escape scrutiny thanks to independent media. Thank you, Navinix. I appreciate that comment. And like I said yesterday, Breaking Points did such a fantastic job with that interview. It was so important to hold a Democrat to task on this issue. I think it's the most important issue right now, okay? Because I'm worried about so much. Right now, obviously, I'm worried about the lives of innocent people. I'm disgusted that our resources are being used to carry out these atrocities. I want it to stop. I want it to stop so badly. But even when this ends, there are other things to worry about, including blowback that will target the United States and Israel. The American people didn't ask for this, and we had no choice. Doesn't even matter which party you vote for. This is what you get. How dare you give me hope says, we got you, Anna. You are our voice. The strength you display gives me strength and honestly is one of the few things that give me hope these days. Thank you. Avenger Dragon in our Twitch community says, this is why I say no to US funding any weapons, even Iron Dome. Avenger Dragon, I actually wasn't with you on the defensive weaponry before, but as I mentioned on the show yesterday, I have completely changed my mind. And I also explained why. I did so in the context of covering the Breaking Points video, if you guys have missed it. YTP Renewed says, I don't want to hear any, they hate us for our freedom ever again. Yeah, and by the way, are we free? Are we free when the government steals our money to fund atrocities abroad? Are we free? Anyway, let's get back to the show. Lots more to get to. Before we move on to our next story, I wanted to just read a few super chats related to the segment I just did, starting with the stinky stocking full of lies who says, the right in the US have this odd split where some of them stick to blaming Israel for literally everything bad in the world, while others have unbreakable support for Israel. It's a fascinating and strange conflict. I think that simplifies it too much. There are definitely conservatives, I think on the older end, who still watch Fox News, and Fox News is 100% in the bag for Israel, partly because Fox News is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who's a massive supporter of Israel, right? So if you're an older conservative Republican and you're still watching Fox News every day, you're getting a steady stream of pro-Israel propaganda. But while I do think that there are some pretty unhinged, disgusting anti-Semites on the right as well, I don't think that that actually makes up the majority of the right wing that has turned on Israel as a result of this ongoing genocide in Gaza. I think it's hard to run a propaganda campaign providing cover for Israel after you see the images and the videos that are coming out of Gaza. And look, I am obviously very much pro-choice, and I will fight on that behalf, any day. But there are conservatives who are genuinely pro-life. I know there are a lot of conservatives who claim they're pro-life, but they're full of crap. There are religious people who are wonderful people. I don't agree with them on abortion, but they are genuine in feeling that abortion is murdering babies. And so when they see what's happening in Gaza, how could they not call it out? Wouldn't they be the biggest hypocrites on the planet if they don't call it out? Now, to be sure, there are definitely people on the right who are those hypocrites. But I am seeing this growing movement on the right, and I do think that conservative independent media has something to do with that as well. Look, you can't deny what you see with your own two eyes. And the media keeps telling us to avoid common sense. No, tap into your common sense. You should believe your eyes and your ears. Pablo Garcia says, that's like saying someone killed in a drunk driving accident, but had a pre-existing condition, so it's not the drunk driver's fault. Disgusting. I totally agree, and that's a really good analogy. Deb Long says, our PM Carney acknowledged Palestine as a sovereign state, and now we're being punished by Trump for it. I'm gonna cover that story, so sit tight. I promise you we're gonna cover that a little later in the hour. Okay, for now though, I just think it's important to kind of talk about something that I've been citing here and there during various interviews, various appearances, and it has to do with something known as the Greater Israel Project. Let's get into it.
Israel has never said, these are our final borders. David Ben-Gurion didn't get up on a soapbox and say, we are going to create a greater Israel, and it's going to include southern Lebanon, southern Syria, the occupied territories, Green Line Israel, the Sinai, and so forth and so on.
Those are real countries. Those are ancient countries and beautiful, beautiful countries with sophisticated, intelligent people, and like the roots of Christianity are there. And like, it's not, in other words, I mean, there's a sense if you're fighting over Sinai or something, it's one thing, but like Lebanon? I mean, that's like one of the great countries in the world. Syria, same thing. And they're being destroyed.
Political scientist John Mearsheimer, the man who wrote one of the best political books that I think everyone should read, it's known as The Israel Lobby. He wrote it with Steve Walt. Spoke to Tucker Carlson about American foreign policy and even did something that not a lot of political scholars are willing to do. He touched on something known as the Greater Israel Project. Now, before we continue, let me just say, the Greater Israel Project is not necessarily a project that all Israelis have bought into or believe should be carried out. The current Israeli government, though, is littered with people who believe in the Greater Israel Project, from the prime minister to the far right, members of the Israeli parliament, people like Ben Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich. They don't hide the ball. This is what they believe in. Itzhak Rabin was assassinated by a member of the Likud party because he believed in the two-state solution. The Likud party does not believe in a two-state solution. There are videos of Benjamin Netanyahu when he was in his 20s saying clearly that he does not believe Palestinians should be allowed to have their own state. They are not allowed to pursue self-determination. So the people in power in Israel right now absolutely believe in something known as the Greater Israel Project. And when you know that, when you understand that, it makes what's currently going on in Gaza make a lot more sense. So with that in mind, here are some more details about what the Greater Israel Project is.
The Zionists from the beginning have wanted a greater Israel. And David Ben-Gurion wrote a piece in 1918. And David Ben-Gurion, of course, is the founding father of Israel.
Yes.
Wrote a piece in 1918. I don't think it's ever been published in English. It's just in Yiddish, where he describes what his goals are for a greater Israel, right? And it obviously includes Green Line Israel, Gaza, the West Bank. It includes parts of the East Bank. It includes parts of southern Syria. It includes parts of southern Lebanon. And it includes the Sinai Peninsula. Just think about that. That was Ben-Gurion's vision. And this was a vision that was shared by almost all the early Zionist leaders. And there are still many people in Israel who are in favor of a greater Israel. They don't want a tiny Israel. The Israel that was created in 1948 is a tiny state.
Yes.
Even with Gaza and the West Bank, it's quite small. It's a postage stamp-like state, right? They want more territory, and they believe they have a historical right to that territory.
Yes, yes. The entire world was promised to Israelis 3,000 years ago. We all know that, right? So this movement really took off after the Six-Day War. So in 1967, the movement for a greater Israel was established. The movement formed a month after the Six-Day War, in which Israel captured the Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula, West Bank, and the Golan Heights. So they called on the Israeli government to keep the land and to settle them with Jewish populations. But they want to go even further, believing that Israel is entitled to the entire area from the Nile River, which of course is located in modern Egypt, to the Euphrates River, which flows through Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, from the river to the sea. Now, many people were very offended when pro-Palestinian protesters were chanting from the river to the sea. But who cares about what some Americans are chanting at university campuses when Israel is actually carrying out the policy on their own behalf? So over the years, Netanyahu has displayed maps showing Israel stretching from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And in fact, this past September, in a speech before the United Nations, he displayed a fascinating map. Take a look at this.
And then in 2020, we made the Abraham Accords, peace with another 4 Arab states. Now look at what happens when we make peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The whole Middle East changes. We tear down the walls of enmity. We bring the possibility of prosperity and peace to this entire region.
Prosperity and peace is laughable coming out of the mouth of that war criminal. But notice that that map didn't include Palestine, Syria, Turkey, or Iraq. And when the only Catholic church in Gaza is bombed, or when Christian churches are destroyed in the West Bank by Israeli settlers, as the IDF, of course, protects them as they carry out these heinous acts, I do not believe for a second that it's an accident. It's an accident? No, it's not an accident. In fact, Daniela Weiss has been saying so loudly for decades. It's not just about Muslims. It's about anyone who doesn't fall in line with their identity, with their beliefs, with their religion. And if you don't believe me, here she is. She's an Israeli settler. Here she is in a documentary that was published by PBS all the way back in 1989. Let's take a look.
I don't see how any person, whether Arab or of any other nationality or any other origin, finding his future here unless he fully 100% identifies with the Zionist idea. And the Zionist idea is a state for the Jewish nation. This is identifying with our tradition, with our faith, with our will to build a state for the Jews, period. And what we exactly want is a state only for the Jews. Sometimes people are afraid to say it because it sounds racism, it sounds discriminatory. Yes, if they want, they are more than welcome to identify with the Zionist idea. But if they don't want, as they express it clearly that they don't want, I don't see any reason why they should stay here.
Israeli settlers literally get paid by the number of homes they destroy in the West Bank. So don't tell me, oh, these are just unhinged Israeli settlers and they're not representative of the Israeli people. And by the way, I think that there are certainly people in Israel who are protesting what's going on. So don't equate scumbag terrorists like Daniela Weiss and the other settlers to the entire population of Israel, because there have been mass protests in Israel and those people deserve support and they should be commended. However, do not tell me that the ideology that you just heard spewed by that woman decades ago is not somehow representative of the current Israeli government, because it is. In fact, the plans to settle Gaza with Israelis is already pretty public. You just have to pay attention. Here's a headline from the New York Times. Israeli far-right minister promotes plan for Jewish resettlement in Gaza. Bezalel Smotrich described Gaza as an inseparable part of Israel, even as the Netherlands announced a ban on him and another hardline Israeli minister. And if you take a look at what the government of Israel is up to, this week on Wednesday, 6 cabinet ministers and 16 coalition MKs requested that Defense Minister Israel Katz approve a scouting mission for the activists inside Gaza as part of Netanyahu's plan to found Jewish towns in the war-torn territory. And just yesterday, Israeli settlers marched to the border of Gaza, ready to take that land, to steal it for themselves, even as Palestinians, children, women, innocent men, elderly people continue to get slaughtered. Take a look.
1,000 families, you'll see them today marching, are ready to move now, here, as the situation is now, and to live in tents now. We are ready with our children to move into the Gaza area right away, because we believe that this is the way to bring quiet, peace, to put an end to Hamas.
We want to return to our land. Gaza is a promise from God to all the Jews that Gaza belongs to Israel, to Jews. So the Harbi take our land, so we have to return it to us.
These people are terrorists and we support them. We fund them. We give them free health care. We give them our unwavering support. They're some of the worst people on the planet. Again, I do not think they're representative of all Israeli civilians, but they are representative of the Israeli government. And the fact that we support the Israeli government, regardless of who's in charge or what kind of ideology they're carrying out, is wrong. So the United States government does not have a leg to stand on when it comes to violations of human rights across the globe. We just don't. Because at this current moment, we are aiding and abetting. We are funding human rights abuses. We are funding slaughter. We are funding the intentional starvation of innocent people. That is what we are doing. Each one of us goes to work every day. We work real hard. We pay our taxes, and a portion of that money funds the absolute atrocities that you have been seeing on your screen over the nearly last 2 years. That's the reality of the situation. And if it makes me an anti-Semite to say it, then go ahead and call me whatever the hell you want. That's not going to deter me, because there's truth and then there are lies and propaganda. And I'm sick of the lies. I'm sick of the propaganda. I know the difference between right and wrong. And if you're kind of, wavering on this issue, you don't know where you're at. My question to you is why? Why is it that you do not think the lives of innocent Palestinians matter at all? Why is it okay for the Israelis to steal land? I just don't think it is right. And we're going to keep calling it out. So in the next segment, we'll talk a little bit about what happened in a Senate vote yesterday pertaining to more weapons for Israel. There are some good Democrats in the Senate who I want to give credit to. Plenty of bad Democrats who I will go scorched earth on. So come right back. We'll get into that story and more. All right, welcome back to our second social break. TYT Rocking says, remember when a Chile rugby team went down in a plane crash up in a frozen mountain range? They ended up eating the dead. I know where you're going with that, and I don't want to think about that, but I hear you. Little Mac writes in and says, Anna, I can tell this is a rough day of stories for you. For good reason. It is a rough day to listen. We can't save the people of Gaza, but we can support and remember them and let them know we care and see them. Definitely. I mean, that's what I try to do every day. And everyone who supports the work that we do, thank you. Because we wouldn't be able to do it without you. I mean, our audience is our single most important source of revenue. We wouldn't be doing this without you guys. So thank you so much for your support. Thunder in My Vein says, Anna, I'm also sending long chat on TYT member app under conversation. And I hope you can use some of them if you feel in future invites, such as with Cuomo. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll take a look. Grizz, my homie from the street, says, I found physically taking out my phone and going on Instagram, searching Gaza today and showing those who don't care can help. Most of the time, they just don't know. The Fox News bubble is ironclad. Grizz, thank you so much for writing that, because today was probably the first day where I've wavered a little bit on my understanding toward people, ordinary people who disagree, especially on this issue. But you're right. I mean, there are people in these media bubbles. And when you watch Fox News, it is Fox News and News Nation. I think News Nation doesn't get enough heat for how propagandistic it is in favor of Israel. It's unbelievable the kind of stuff that they air on News Nation. Anyway, again, like I said, I'm looking forward to going on Chris Cuomo's show on Monday. We'll see if that actually happens, though. Biffantastic says, viewer for 10 plus years, I respect and love this show, but the constant hyper focus on Israel, Gaza, every single show, this extreme anger, hatred, borders on obsessive. I'm funding it. I don't know where you live in the world, Biffantastic. I am partially funding this. It is a genocide. I equate this to what the Germans did to the Jews. Do you understand that? And the fact that my government supports it disgusts me. So I'm gonna do anything and everything I can to shed light on what's actually happening. And if you don't like it, you don't have to watch. I'm totally fine with that. You can't watch it anymore, that's fine. I care deeply for the US, Israel, and Gaza, but you don't care about Gaza. You don't care about Gaza because you don't want to hear about it anymore. So just sit back and let our government take our money to fund the atrocities that Israel is currently committing. You can't say you care about Gaza if you're offended about us covering what's happening in Gaza with our money, with our bombs. Let's get back to the show. Well, the United States Senate held a vote yesterday in regard to weapons to Israel, more military aid to Israel. And the real question is, who voted in favor of more aid? Who voted against it? Well, we're about to tell you. Let's get into it.
At a time when Israeli soldiers are shooting civilians trying to get food aid on a near daily basis, when extremist settlers are pushing Palestinians from their homes in the West Bank, and when Gaza is witnessing mass starvation as a result of Israeli government policy, the United States should not and must not be providing more weapons to enable these atrocities. Mr. President, whatever happens tonight, history will condemn those of us who fail to act in the face of these horrors.
On this vote, the yeas are 24, the nays are 73, and the motion is not agreed to.
Of course, it's not agreed to. Well, the Senate did hold a vote late last night in order to once again attempt to block, a resolution, or they did vote to block a resolution that was brought by Senator Bernie Sanders, a Jewish American who actually meant it when he said never again. So I commend him for that. But this resolution was meant to end certain weapons sales to Israel, which is currently starving 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Actually, to be fair to Israel, they might actually be starving less than 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, considering the fact that they've also engaged in a mass slaughter campaign, and we don't know what the actual death toll in Gaza really is. So the silver lining is that for the first time ever, and if you want to call this a silver lining, please do so. A majority of Democrats voted in favor of blocking the military aid to Israel. The first time. This is the first time a majority of Democrats voted in favor of blocking military aid to Israel. So first things first, what were the two resolutions sponsored by Bernie along with Senators Jeff Merkley and Peter Welch? Well, one of Wednesday's resolutions would have blocked the $676 million sale of 5,000 heavy-duty bombs and 5,000 guidance kits for bombs. The other would have prohibited the sale of tens of thousands of fully automatic assault rifles. Sanders argued that the arms transfers would clearly violate US legal requirements for foreign military sales because Israel has used weapons provided by Washington to kill thousands of Palestinian civilians. We actually do have certain laws on the books that prevents the United States from sending bombs and guns and weapons to foreign countries that then use those weapons to carry out war crimes. And Israel has been doing that. But Israel is our special ally that does nothing for us. Nothing for us. I mean, just ask anyone who makes that argument, why are they our special ally? And they never have an answer. But anyway, putting that aside, they're a special ally, so they get away with literal murder. Okay. He also said that the rifles in question will go to arm a police force overseen by Itamar Ben-Gvir, who advocates for the forcible expulsion of Palestinians from the region, who has been convicted of support for terrorism by the Israeli court, and who has distributed weapons to violent settlers in the West Bank to use against unarmed Palestinians and drive them out of their homes. But the overwhelming majority of Congress doesn't actually care about that at all, including some Democrats. The resolutions ultimately failed 27-70. And Democrats were split on the vote. 12 Democratic senators who previously backed arms sales to Israel joined Bernie Sanders to block the funding. New supporters included Maine Independent Senator Angus King, who said this week that he would no longer support Netanyahu's government because of his use of starvation as a weapon of war. Thank you to Senator King for coming to his senses, finally. He says, I had just had it. I kept expecting that Israel would wake up and realize what an awful thing they were perpetuating, and that surely they would at least open up humanitarian aid. They just continued to not do it. And I just reached the point where enough was enough. So there are other new supporters that have flipped since the last vote in April, and that includes Jean Shaheen, Jack Reed, Patty Murray, Tammy Baldwin, John Ossoff, Tammy Duckworth, Raphael Warnock, Angela Alsobrooks, and Sheldon Whitehouse. And to them, I say thank you for voting the right way on these resolutions. Notably absent, though, from that vote was Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin, who during her interview with Crystal Ball said that cutting off sales of offensive weaponry to Israel was something that she wants to look at. Okay.
You cut off aid to Israel so long as they're committing crimes against humanity.
There is a difference between a weapon to protect a country from incoming missiles versus other type. Offensive and defensive weapons are different.
So would you support offensive weapons ban? Like, would you stop any offensive aid to Israel?
That certainly, to me, would be a place to look, but I'm not going to cut off a blanket next sale on a defensive weapon.
She was lying about maybe wanting to cut Israel off from offensive weapons. And nothing makes that clearer than the fact that instead of staying in Washington to vote on Bernie's resolutions, which only applied to offensive weaponry, by the way, she was on the Colbert Report claiming that there's no deep state. In fact, she used to be a spy. She used to be part of the CIA. And when she was asked about the CIA, which is part of the deep state, she's like, these are great Americans, corn-fed Americans. They're just like you and me. They wear their blue jeans. They wear their white New Balance shoes. F out of here. Not a single Republican voted for either resolution. Okay, so let me emphasize that. Republican lawmakers are even worse on this issue. All the people in the audience who want to glaze Democrats and get mad at me for ever criticizing Democrats, Republicans were worse on this issue. Are you happy? Does that make you feel better? I don't care about partisan obsessions right now because there are bad people on both sides of the political aisle who are rooting for the mass slaughter that we're seeing in Gaza and the West Bank. You want a partisan show? There is a plethora of that garbage out there. Go watch it. I am not going to provide cover for Democrats engaging in bad behavior, ever. That's not me. It never will be me. Senate Foreign Relations Chair Jim Risch gave the usual excuse, arguing that Hamas and not Israel is perpetuating the war. Quote, these are misguided resolutions, and if adopted, would abandon America's closest ally in the Middle East that drags us into wars, that now has led to Americans having the stain of genocide in their history soon. And so our funding for genocide continues. Now, Zateo has decided to mock some of what has been going on here in a way to basically draw attention to how depraved our government is. So as the situation in Gaza becomes more and more horrific, we're actually seeing centrist Democrats desperately trying to act like they care deeply about the innocent civilians and Palestinians that are currently being slaughtered with our help. So writer Frank Capello from Mehdi Hassan's outlet Zateo filmed a mock video basically posing as a centrist Democrat. And despite it being utterly ridiculous, I gotta say, it sounds just like the real politicians and the arguments that they've been making in DC. So let's take a look.
Senator, can you comment on the ongoing humanitarian crisis and famine happening in Gaza?
What is happening in Gaza right now is absolutely terrible. We need to be doing everything in our power to end this crisis now.
Can you also comment on why you recently posed for a photo with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when he was visiting the capital last week?
I also believe, as Democrats, that we can't just be employing an either-or strategy. Okay, it needs to be both and. We need to both advocate for the people who are being killed and have lunch with the person who is killing them. I actually went to that meeting to hold Netanyahu accountable. I asked him, what are you doing to end this mass suffering? And then he reminded me that this is all Hamas's fault.
Will you be calling for weapons restrictions to put pressure on Israel?
Well, I believe that Israel has the right to defend itself and it needs those weapons to do so. I will, however, be calling for a restriction on some commercial goods. For instance, I don't think anyone in Israel should be able to play the Nintendo Switch 2. I don't know if you saw, but my office just published a strongly worded letter demanding that Netanyahu holds a public press conference where he announces an investigation into the killings of Palestinians at aid sites. Or at the very least, he needs to tweet about it.
That was perfect. That was so perfect. It is sad that you don't have a party in America that you can put your support behind because they're disgusted with what's happening in the Middle East right now. They're disgusted with what's happening to innocent civilians. Because even if you vote for Democrats, there's no guarantee that they'll be on the right side of history on this matter. And it's just the most depressing thing in the world. It really is. The power of the Israel lobby in the United States, the possibility of blackmail against powerful people in this country, all of that stuff really should make you question whether we live in a free country that is guided by democratic values, liberal democracy, the people making decisions about what's right for us. Obviously, I've questioned that historically because of the fact that we have this legalized bribery baked into our political system. But when it comes to our foreign policy, anytime it has to do with Israel, it's so extreme, so extremely in favor of anything Israel wants, regardless of what kind of government's in charge, that I think the issue goes even deeper than simple corruption. So, final story, I'm gonna move on to trade because there was a development on Trump's trade deals today. And I think you should know about just how much our relationship with Israel impacts every single facet of American life.
The level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable, and it's rapidly deteriorating. Canada intends to recognize the state of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced that Canada would in fact recognize Palestine as a state with some strings attached, because of course. In fact, France happens to be the only country that has announced that they intend to recognize the Palestinian state with no strings attached, but it's okay, we're making some progress. I like that announcement by Canada. Apparently, though, that was just too much for the US President Donald Trump, who has taken the position of lapdog to Israel. But to be fair to President Trump, Almost every single president is a lapdog to Israel. It is demanded of them. And most of them will abide. It's the most embarrassing part of being an American at this point, that we don't have leaders who want to represent us. We have leaders who are lapdogs to a foreign government. So Trump has now announced that he might pull the plug on US-Canada negotiations for a trade deal, which only goes to hurt Americans and potentially Canadians as well. So here's more of Carney explaining their conditions for a Palestinian state.
This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state. Canada will increase its efforts in supporting strong democratic governance in Palestine and the contributions of its people to a more peaceful and hopeful future. I spoke today with President Abbas at length to reaffirm his commitments. Canada reiterates that Hamas must immediately release all hostages taken in the horrific terrorist attack of October 7th, that Hamas must disarm, and that Hamas must play no role in the future governance of Palestine.
So Carney also left open the option that Canada would not recognize the state of Palestine in September if their demands were not met. Okay, so then you have the UK, which some might argue like, ooh, they heroically also announced conditional plans to recognize Palestinian statehood. But I'm gonna go through their conditions because I just find some of them laughable because as we know, Israel does not want to recognize a Palestinian state. They want to do anything and everything possible to prevent that from happening. So I find it fascinating that two of the conditions for the UK to recognize a Palestinian state include Israel agreeing to not annex the West Bank and for Israel committing to a peace process resulting in a two-state solution. So in other words, you know what, I take it back. The UK is not serious about recognizing a Palestinian state. This is complete and utter BS. Oh, Sir Keir Starmer. He's getting a little bit of pressure from members of his Labor government. And so he's going to pretend like, oh, you know, in certain conditions, I will recognize a Palestinian state. I'm just gonna need Israel to promise not to annex the West Bank. What kind of garbage is this? They're annexing the West Bank as we speak. So applying a condition that puts the ball in Israel's court is laughable. A week ago today, France announced that they would recognize a Palestinian state in September of this year, period, no strings attached. You go, France. Now, that totals 3 US allies who stated that they will or might recognize a Palestinian state in 7 days, in the last 7 days. So Trump was pretty ambivalent about this matter when asked if Britain should recognize a Palestinian state on Monday. He says, quote, I'm not going to take a position. I don't mind him taking a position. I'm looking to getting people fed right now. Oh, are you? That's the number one position because you have a lot of starving people. You sure do have a lot of starving people by design. And in the days since he made that statement, his tone has changed rather dramatically. So let's see what he had to say on Tuesday.
Is there any use at all in pressuring Israel now to come to some sort of longer-term solution?
Well, you could make the case that you're rewarding people, that you're rewarding Hamas if you do that, and I don't think they should be rewarded. So I'm not in that camp, to be honest. We'll let you know where we are, but I am not in that camp.
Mr. President,
because if you do that, you really are rewarding Hamas, and I'm not about to do that.
You're rewarding Hamas. Well, okay, aren't you rewarding Israel as they carry out atrocities and intentional starvation in Gaza by continuing to support them? How come that doesn't matter at all? By the way, just going back real quick, I got a little more clarity on the UK, and I want to correct myself because the truth matters, and I don't want to needlessly put out inaccurate information about what the UK is saying. So the UK is going to recognize a Palestinian state unless Israel does those things. In other words, if Israel does not go ahead and start a peace process, which obviously they won't, the UK is going to recognize the state. So my reading of it was incorrect. I got the wrong impression from what I read. So, okay, all right. So UK is kind of in the same camp as Canada, and that's a good thing. Let me keep going. So yesterday, in response to Canada's announcement, Trump stated, wow, Canada has just announced that it is backing statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them. Oh, Canada. Why? Why would that make it hard for us to make a trade deal with Canada? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, which is why it wasn't surprising that Carrie Lake supported the message. She's one of the dumbest people we've had the displeasure of hearing speak on a political stage. She says, Canada is not in the driver's seat. Bitch, you're not in the driver's seat. Shut up and sit down. But once again, Trump is getting pushback from others in the MAGA crowd. Matt Walsh, for instance, says, this is ridiculous. If a trade deal with Canada is beneficial to the American people, then it should go forward regardless of Canada's stance on Palestine. The benefit of the American people should be the guiding principle here. America first, am I right? No, not America first. It appears that Trump wasn't serious about that. Owen Schroyer, who's been pretty good on this issue, says, sounds like Trump is willing to sabotage a good deal with Canada on behalf of Israel. You're right about that. And then you have Mel. I'm not really familiar with her other than what I've seen her post on X. And her posts tend to be very cathartic, and I can tell she's conservative. She says, sorry, friends, gonna have to pay more for gas and groceries because Canada is doing something Israel doesn't like. And we all know who actually runs this country. And remember, Trump has set tomorrow, August 1st, as its new tariff deadline. Meaning, if we don't have a deal with Canada, then the insanely high tariffs will go into effect. And that's not just for Canada, that's for any other country that we have failed to make a trade deal with. Or I should be clear, Trump has failed to make a trade deal with. Today, for example, Trump announced a 90-day pause on tariffs on Mexico in order for negotiations to continue. So he's making some exceptions. Who knows what's going to happen with Canada? So as for Canada, they are facing a 35% tariff on exports beginning tomorrow, meaning anything that is imported to the United States from Canada will be taxed at 35%. How is that not going to negatively impact the American people? And by the way, obviously, it could spell trouble for Canada because they send 75% of their exports to the United States. Even before last night's post, Trump had waved off the idea of reaching a deal with Canada. He said last Friday, I think Canada could be one where there's just a tariff, not really a negotiation. Oh, wow, art of the deal. Great job. But it's worth noting that apparently Trump has acknowledged the reputational damage that Israel's government is doing to itself. Wow, it's amazing. Like the cognitive dissonance here is so incredible. He says, my people are starting to hate Israel, Trump recently warned one prominent Jewish donor, according to a Middle East expert who speaks regularly with the administration. I mean, look, it's hilarious to me because you keep hearing various mouthpieces from the Israeli government talking about how, oh, we're losing the PR war. We just got to do more censorship. We got to install an Israeli censor over at TikTok so we can control the narrative. You guys aren't going to be able to control the narrative. You guys are killing innocent people. We all know it. We all see it. There is no PR campaign that has ever existed or could ever exist that can erase the war crimes and the atrocities that are currently being committed. That's their doing. And yeah, it is radicalizing people against the state of Israel. Meanwhile, Trump continues to cover for the Israeli government, which is unsurprising to me at this point. It should be unsurprising to all of us. He says that the fastest way to end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is for Hamas to surrender and release the hostages. Hamas has agreed to give up governance of the Gaza Strip. They've agreed to return all the hostages. They've even wavered on the idea of a permanent ceasefire. Israel is the obstacle. Israel wants the Gaza Strip for themselves. Anyone saying otherwise is lying to you, including our president. We'll be right back.
I went to Kentucky Fried Chicken when I first got my license, like 17 years old or 17, 18, whatever it was. And I'm driving, I think, my dad's Oldsmobile. And I parked it in a place where there was two cars next to me, really tight spot, and a car behind me. I don't even know how I got in there because I'm a terrible driver. Back then I was an even worse driver. And on the roads I'm okay, but in parking spots, I have terrible spatial reasoning and I'm a mess. And on my way out, I hit all three cars at once. I broke all records, okay? So I went, as I'm backing out, I went boom, oh, and this side hit that car, this side hit this car, and the back hit the third car, okay? And I got stuck. I didn't know how to get out. Like, I went, okay, for this, and then I'm like, no, and then, right? And then finally I had to stop, go inside the KFC and go, A, I'm sorry, I hit a bunch of your cars. They're like, what do you mean a bunch of your cars? I'm like, I don't know. Wow, there's a B? Yeah. I'm like, I hit three cars. I don't know. So you guys gotta come help me, okay? Okay, so one, my bad. Really sorry about that. Okay, number two, can someone take my car out? Because I don't want to keep hitting your cars, and I'm incapable of taking it out of this spot.
Now, baby, move that fat, baby, move that fat.
Hi, I'm Brett Ehrlich with Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. This is Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. Hi, Brett Ehrlich here. According to EPA head Scott Pruitt, climate change is not happening. He cited a meme on Facebook he saw. When pressed to back up this source, he said it must be accurate because the watermark said it was made by a scientist. So, your move, Truth.
At TYT, our mission is to boldly pursue truth, challenge the establishment, and drive positive change. At a time when corporate capture of our media, our government, and our politics is nearly absolute, everyday working people need a champion to fight for them and to push back against the powerful interests that threaten our democracy itself. At TYT, we're proudly progressive and call out corruption and duplicity wherever we see it, from Republicans, Democrats, or anyone else. And unlike mainstream news media outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma. We only have to answer to our audience, and for nearly 2 decades, we've accomplished that by delivering honest, timely, and insightful perspectives on the day's news without fear or favor or concern for whose toes we might step on or which powerful elites we might offend. And while we're super serious about the news, we also manage to do it in a way that is fun and lighthearted. We can do this together and serve our audience, and yes, have fun doing it.
You are the media revolution. You are much needed.
TYT, TYT.
The place is like 95% TYT army.
You guys, the Young Turks, which is my favorite channel, we're getting that message out.
Tank and the Young Turks do an extraordinarily good job.
No matter what mainstream media says, you have to listen to the Young Turks.
The people who support us on the internet, that's what gives us strength. That's what allows anyone who was in there who was undecided to think one side seems to be winning. They seem to have a bigger army. There might be a reason for that. So thank you guys.
Oh, revolution without dancing is a revolution not worth having.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Anna Kasparian with you. Lots of comments. I don't want to leave them on the table. I want to read as many as I can. So I'll do that right now. Tugging the Tubin in our members section says, hey, from Mary Beth and Marty's account, or Mary Beth for short. Today is Marty's 50th birthday. He's watching while I comment. Please wish him a good one. He's my favorite person. Happy birthday. I am kind of sad that you're watching a show that's talking about some pretty depressing things on your birthday, but hopefully you're going to do something fun and nice afterwards, or have already done something fun and nice. Sexy Speed Racer says, Anna, solo Thursday, cool. Let's go to some of the comments about the stories. Wong John says, Israeli settlers are just a terrorist organization without a name. You're right about that. I mean, we treat them so differently from other terrorist organizations, even though they certainly fit the mold. Let's go to Itchy Brother Dragon, who says, Anna, you're using your voice and it's creating change. That's a fact. Thank you for being part of our Twitch community and supporting the show and the work that we're doing. And Leica Fox, I really want to emphasize your comment. Leica writes in our Twitch community and says, and guys, this is super important. I know you already know this, okay? But for anyone who's getting radicalized by what's happening in all the wrong ways, which means it's leading you to like have hate in your heart for people you shouldn't have hate for. Leica writes and says, as a Jewish American, I am deeply ashamed because when I said never again, I meant it for anyone. And there are wonderful Jewish Americans. There are wonderful Israelis, okay? Wonderful people all across the world who are loudly protesting what's happening in Gaza right now. So don't ever make the mistake of equating the Jewish population with the scum that's currently running Israel right now. Octo Squiddy says, it's not the size of the state, it's how you use it. E. Higgins in our member section says, it's a wrap for the US, start looking for other countries to live in. No, I'm gonna live here and I'm gonna fight for a better country. I love America. There ain't no way I'm gonna be like run out of my own country because it's currently being run by demons. Killjoy 100 says, I love when Anna goes off on comments, just dreading the day it's me. Yeah, look, my red line is, I don't want to hear about the genocide anymore. No, you're going to hear about the genocide if you watch the show. Sorry. That's all. That's probably the only thing that makes me lose my composure significantly at this point. And it's anything having to do with, whitewashing or laundering the war crimes that are being committed in Gaza. All right, let's get to our next story.
State of Israel and the Jewish people, I say this. We will always stand firmly alongside you. You can count on us today, tomorrow, and always.
As if our lawmakers in Washington weren't subservient enough to the Israeli government, 2 AIPAC-funded representatives are now proposing a bill that would block federal financial aid to universities that decide to cut ties with Israel. It's amazing. So one of the sponsors is the woman you just heard from, Republican Virginia Fox. The other is actually a Democratic lawmaker, unsurprisingly, Josh Gottheimer. He's been complete garbage on this issue. On Tuesday, Representatives Fox and Gottheimer introduced the Protect Economic and Academic Freedom Act of 2025. Let's pause. I'm going to bring this graphic back up in a second, but I have to just say, economic and academic freedom? You guys want to punish universities who are so disgusted with the atrocities carried out by Israel that they no longer want to invest in Israel. You're going to punish them. How is that economic or academic freedom? These people are the worst. Okay, let's put that graphic back up. It's a bill that would cut off federal funds to any college that boycotts Israel or imposes limits on academic cooperation with Israeli institutions. Why? So they can propagate their lies and brainwash American students into thinking that Israel's our greatest ally, even as they take our money to commit atrocities in the Middle East. The bill would require colleges to annually certify that they will not engage in a non-expressive commercial boycott of Israel or companies and other entities licensed by Israel. Any university that refuses to do business with Israeli entities, other than a valid business reason, would be made ineligible for Title IX. No, I'm sorry. That's 9, right? No, yes, it is. Title IX financial aid programs, including Pell Grants and I'm sorry, it's Title VI. Yeah, Title VI, Pell Grants and student loans. So obviously the intention of the bill is to scare other colleges away from, breaking their ties with Israel despite growing pressure from student activists to do so. I think our university system is it's done. Enrollment is down considerably. These universities don't stand for anything. And if they do want to stand for something, we have a Congress that's actively trying to prevent them from doing so. I mean, this is amazing. So they're threatening to block financial aid, and it would be absolutely disastrous to the students who would need that financial aid in order to be able to go to college. Undergraduate students received $16,360 in financial aid on average in the 2023-2024 school year, according to College Board. So why are Fox and Gottheimer even pushing this legislation? Who are they to meddle in the financial decisions of university campuses? I mean, they certainly haven't given a damn about universities price gouging the hell out of American students, helping them to dig themselves into a massive financial hole that they can't get out of. They don't want to intervene on those issues, God forbid. Gottheimer is one of AIPAC's top allies in Congress, of course he is, and has received over $1 million in campaign funding from the group's donor network over his career. Our government is occupied by Israel. Let's be clear about that. Fox, a senior member of the House Education and the Workforce Committee, received more than $92,000 from AIPAC-backed donors in the 2024 cycle alone. One election cycle alone. And look, unfortunately, it's not just federal lawmakers looking to crack down on criticism of Israel on college campuses. In some cases, the censorship is happening in-house. And I think Harvard's a great example of that. It's pathetic. So Harvard, for example, has this initiative at Harvard, an initiative created to study the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, was stripped down after allegations of bias and anti-Semitism. See, if you're talking about Israel at all on a college campus, all you can do is talk about how wonderful Israel is. God forbid you ever talk about any of the atrocities the IDF has engaged in or the far-right settlers have engaged. God forbid, you can't do that. You can't do that. I remember being in grad school. I don't even know how this happened, okay? I got a political science degree, master's degree. It wasn't really that useful, to be honest with you, but nonetheless, there were a few political scholars that I was exposed to as a result of getting that education that I'm very grateful for. John Mearsheimer happened to be one of them. So we were able to read the Israel lobby in essay form. It first came out as an essay, and then Mearsheimer and Wolff put out a whole book titled The Israel Lobby, which I highly recommend to everyone read. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is super interesting. It's well-sourced. They show their work. And this seems to be a big problem in our government. And every student was either silent because they were afraid to be critical of the Israel lobby, or they condemned the political scientists behind that essay. I was super young and I did not have the confidence to debate anybody in class. I was only like 20 years old. I got my college degree very early because I went to high school and college at the same time. Anyway, whatever. But my point is, I wish I knew the things that I know now to be able to debate those students because they were wrong. I can't imagine the Israel lobby being assigned at Harvard at this point. So back to this story. Harvard's Divinity School's Religion and Public Life program launched 5 years ago with the lofty goal of advancing the public understanding of religion in service of a just world at peace. The program offers a master's degree for roughly a dozen students per year, a certificate program, and events and courses for students across the campus. So as part of their pro-peace mission, the program ran annual trips to Israel and the occupied West Bank, where students met with politicians, farmers, artists, and human rights groups. But the trip and a related course on the Israel-Palestinian conflict were put on pause in March amid what the school described as substantial adjustments to religion and public life. On March 28th, 2 weeks after the Trump administration announced it was investigating Harvard over alleged mishandling of anti-Semitism, the Divinity School issued an update saying that the program's curriculum would be overhauled and the Religion, Conflict, and Peace Initiative would be paused to rethink its focus. I mean, they committed a terrible act, right? They had the audacity to send students to the occupied West Bank to speak to Palestinians who have been dealing with decades of occupation by the Israeli government and the IDF. We can't get that side of the story. But when it comes to propaganda trips that American Jews go on, birthright, that's what it's called. When it comes to the propaganda trips to Israel that our politicians go on, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. Since January, all three of the program's leaders and most of its staff were left. And basically, they have left. They haven't had their contracts renewed. And now former faculty members are speaking out, thankfully, and they're sharing concerns that Harvard is caving to outside pressure, because they are. It's obvious. Hussein Rashid, the program's former assistant dean who resigned from his post in January and left at the end of June, told NBC News, "Nobody came to our defense. Our students were fantastic. Our administrators were cowards." Of course, critics of the program, including some Jewish students and organizations, are absolutely thrilled at this censorship, to see that this program was overhauled. They say it invited one-sided anti-Semitic speakers to give book talks and webinars and encourage students to reject Zionism. Harvard's April report on anti-Semitism singled out the program and said it was biased against Israel. Why do American students at Ivy Leagues have to support Zionism? Why is that required? If you're a Jewish American and you support Zionism, all the power to you, bro. Great. I don't think American students need to be forced into supporting anything, including Zionism. And how one-sided is it when they only hear the pro-Zionist argument, while the stories and the reality of the Palestinian people is being censored? Seems pretty entitled, seems propagandistic. The program was cited in a lawsuit by former Divinity School student Shabbos Kestenbaum, who got his ass handed to him by me on Piers Morgan's show, not once but twice. He is a pathetic little troll who just repeats the same talking points over and over again and thinks that he's making good points simply because he's the Timu version of Ben Shapiro. Easy to dismantle his talking points. We've heard the same points over and over again. He's pathetic. I also called him a bitch on Piers Morgan because that's what he is. But 6 alumni of the program did tell NBC News they adamantly disagree. They say the overhaul was unnecessary because the program was already incorporating multiple viewpoints and encouraged students to think critically, which is what you should get at any university. You're supposed to debate things. You're supposed to get different perspectives. That's the reason why I defended people like Ben Shapiro or Ann Coulter, people I disagree with vehemently, when they were protested at university campuses and when they weren't allowed to speak. I don't like their ideas, but they should be allowed to speak. But I would venture to say that Ben Shapiro probably loves the fact that this program got censored, that it was overhauled to the detriment of the Palestinian perspective and to the benefit of Israelis. I'm sure he loves that because censorship is okay as long as it's convenient and benefits him. All right, so the program will continue to operate under new leadership this fall, but with significant changes. The final thing that I want to say is, look, this active campaign to censor a pretty important side to this conflict. It touches every facet of life, universities, media, and now universities are not the only institutions ramping up their censorship of Israel criticism. As I covered yesterday, TikTok has hired a former IDF soldier as their new hate speech manager to censor anyone who's critical of the Israeli government. And independent journalist James Lee made a video about the woman's background. Then he posted on X, just got off the phone with a TikTok insider warning me that they are in the process of doing a full sweep to ban accounts that have posted anti-Israel, pro-Palestine content, and that I should probably delete this post right away. Well, there you have it. What are they trying to hide? Why are they so obsessed with censoring an entire perspective on this entire decades-long conflict? I think we all know the answer. The thing is, none of these people have any control over us, which is why I get to run my mouth as much as I want, and I will continue to do so. In fact, I'll continue to do so when we come back after the break. We're going to switch gears a little bit, though. We're going to talk about Nancy Pelosi and how chafed she got with Jake Tapper for simply bringing up an accusation that's been made against her. That and more coming up. Don't miss it. Welcome back to our social break. Titan writes in and says, this is unbearable to bear witness to, let alone endure. It's disgusting how Israel calls any criticism of their genocide anti-Semitic, but it's not anti-Semitic to ethnically cleanse Palestinians who are themselves a Semitic people. Well, I mean, as you know, Israel has fully dehumanized them, and their propaganda, I mean, it's all over our media. And I think a lot of Americans have been brainwashed. I don't think most people know that Palestinians are Semitic people. You know, Robert Maxwell, I didn't know this until this week. And man, it makes me question so much. But Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, who was absolutely part of Mossad, who was a hardcore Zionist, owned the companies that published textbooks for schools in our country. It's eye-opening. McGraw-Hill was one of them. He tried to have a majority stake. There was some pushback on that, but eventually he got what he wanted. And Macmillan is another textbook publisher that he fully owned. So we had an Israeli spy publishing our history books, our social study books. Liz Smith says, stay strong, Anna. You're doing the right thing. And that is always harder. Don't I know it, sister? Don't I know it? You're our voice. You give us hope. Thank you. Thank you for that message. Make It Make Sense says, Anna, I don't understand if Israel will stop till unconditional surrender. Why doesn't Hamas, PLO, people of Gaza surrender already? Isn't stopping the kill. Do you understand that they have surrendered? Why are you just taking what Israel is saying at face value? Seriously. Go ahead and read Jeremy Scahill's reporting on the ceasefire negotiations and get a load of everything that Hamas has been willing to give up, including governing Gaza. They want the Gaza Strip, Israel wants the Gaza Strip to be completely demilitarized, no weapons in Gaza. Ask the West Bank how that's worked out for them. Time to wake up. Please, I'm begging you, time to wake up. This is not about Hamas. If it was about Hamas, Benjamin Netanyahu would not have facilitated its funding, but that's what he did. You don't think it's a little strange that there were no IDF soldiers protecting the border between Israel and Gaza? That it took hours on October 7th for IDF soldiers to respond to the slaughter and the atrocities that were being committed by Hamas? You don't find that a little strange? I find that strange. And it conveniently gave Israel the perfect excuse to do what it's doing now. Time to wake up, seriously. All right. I'll address cucked Wes Watson when we come back. Address one comment in our super chats and then move on to non-Israel related stories because we do have those. Cucked Wes Watson says, you know all Jews benefit from Jewish privilege, right? Why are you cucking and saying not all Jews? LOL, this is why the left will never go anywhere. I don't want the left to go in an anti-Semitic direction. And if you are anti-Semitic, I would like you to eat a Richard. Unfortunately, I can't use the word I really want to use. I'm not anti-Semitic and I don't like anti-Semites. If you're anti-Semitic, well, then you've made a mistake by thinking you're going to watch this show and get that kind of garbage spewed out of my mouth. The Israeli government is a huge problem. The far right, disgusting terroristic settlers who are terrorizing people are a problem. But I will never in a million years condemn any population as a whole. I will never condemn civilians and desire their slaughter, regardless of which side of this, issue they're on. So don't mistake my absolute disdain for the members of Israel's government, for these IDF soldiers, for hatred toward the Jews, because that's not who I am. I know that Israel supporters will claim that I'm anti-Semitic because they want to silence me. It's not going to work. But don't mistake what they're saying for truth, because it's not. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go to Nancy Pelosi.
Let me just read what he said. I'm sorry that we had some sort of technical issue. Nancy Pelosi became rich.
Why do you have to read that? We're here to talk about the 60th anniversary of Medicaid. That's what I agreed to come to talk about.
Yeah, but I wanted
what that means in the election.
I wanted to give you a chance just to respond. He accused you of insider trading. What's your response to that?
House Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi does not want to be called out on anything involving insider trading. And she has been accused of insider trading quite a bit because Homegirl seems to have a stock portfolio that beats the S&P 500. How does that happen? Now, she had an opportunity here to respond to Trump's claims and defend herself against allegations that Trump made. And so she really did take issue with that. She was mad at Jake Tapper for even bringing that up. But here's what Jake Tapper was referencing. Let's take a look.
Nancy Pelosi became rich by having inside information. She made a fortune with her husband, and I think that's disgraceful. So in that sense, I'd like it, but I'd have to really see I study these things very carefully, and this just happened. So I'll take a look at it. But conceptually, I like it. And what I do think is Nancy Pelosi should be investigated because she has the highest return of anybody practically in the history of Wall Street.
Now, look, in that statement, he purported to be supportive of legislation that would ban Congress from trading individual stocks. We covered this story in depth yesterday. We'll revisit what Trump actually thinks about that legislation in just a minute. But let's stay on Nancy Pelosi for a second. Look, it is true that you look at the stock, activity, the selling, the buying in Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio, and it's so clear that it's either influencing the way she votes on legislation. So if you're personally invested in a company and legislation comes up that could potentially hurt the bottom line for the very company you're invested in, you might be influenced to vote a certain way. If you have closed door briefings, leading up to COVID lockdowns, for instance, and you're privy to information about upcoming lockdowns that will hurt businesses and their bottom line, you might engage in some trade activity that's beneficial for your stock portfolio. So these issues keep coming up, which is why it's wonderful that Senator Josh Hawley has proposed a bill in the Senate and is attempting to ban members of Congress from trading individual stocks. Now, to entice Democrats on the committee to vote in favor of it, he also included, a ban on the president and the vice president from trading individual stocks. Trump lost his mind over that. I'm going to revisit that in just a second. But before I do, Pelosi did respond to allegations made by Trump. Let's take a look at that.
That's ridiculous. In fact, I very much support the stop the trading of members of Congress. Not that I think anybody's doing anything wrong. If they are prosecuted and they go to jail. But because of the confidence it instills in the American people, don't worry about this. But I have no concern about the obvious investments that have been made over time. I'm not into it, my husband is, but it isn't anything to do with anything insider. But the president has his own exposure, so he's always projecting.
That was so hilarious. Okay, number one, it is kind of funny and ironic that the House Speaker Emerita seems to always have difficulty speaking, like just making cogent, concise arguments. But more importantly, members of Congress don't get prosecuted if they're suspected of insider trading. Are you kidding me? So during the Obama administration, there was some legislation passed to essentially serve as some or a bit of a safeguard against insider trading in Congress. But all it is they have to report. They just have to report what their stock portfolio is. That's it. And barely, like they give vague estimates in regard to how much money they've invested in a given company. Oftentimes, even though they're mandated by law to do this reporting, a lot of members of Congress fail to do so, and they don't even suffer any consequences when they fail to do so. So no, Nancy, we all know that you guys do not get investigated and prosecuted for insider trading. Come on. All right, and she does not support this. She absolutely does not. And the only reason why I believe, this is my interpretation, my read of it, she knows that this legislation is not going to pass. Okay, I do think that there are a select few in Congress who are principled about this and do want to pass this legislation, but it's only a select few. Josh Hawley seems to be one of them, and he's a Republican. But every single Republican in the very committee that he brought this legislation up in voted against it. Okay, so it did pass committee 8-7 with every Republican except for Hawley voting no. All the Democrats voted yes. Now, as we all know, Republicans control Congress. Plus, even if there was a slim majority of Democrats controlling Congress, there are corporate Democrats who do not want to pass this bill. This bill is not going to pass. Nancy Pelosi knows that, which is why she's like, oh yes, I'm totally in favor of passing it. I love it, it's great. Right. And look, why do I suspect that she's not actually in favor of passing this bill? Well, it's because of what she has said on the record before. Take a look.
Insider just completed a 5-month investigation finding that 49 members of Congress and 182 senior congressional staffers have violated the Stock Act, the insider trading law. I'm wondering if you have any reaction to that. And secondly, should members of Congress and their spouses be banned from trading individual stocks while serving in Congress?
No, I don't know to this second one. We have a responsibility to report in the stock. On the stock, but I'm not familiar with that 5-month review, but if people aren't reporting, they should be. Because this is a free market and people, we're a free market economy, they should be able to participate in that.
Yeah, but is it a free market economy when members of Congress are deciding legislation and winners and losers in our economy based on which companies they're personally invested in? That's not a free market. What a joke. These corrupt politicians got to go, man. And they they hold on. They'll be like 120 years old. They're still holding on. It's amazing. It really is. But let's go back to Donald Trump, who purported to be supportive of this legislation. So as I mentioned earlier, Senator Hawley wanted to get the Democrats on the, Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee on board with his proposal. And so in order to do that, he included a ban on the president and vice president being able to trade individual stocks. That got Trump's dander up. He did not like that. And he's been attacking Josh Hawley ever since, calling him a second-tier senator. I don't even know what that means. And claiming that the bill is so bad for the country. They're all full of crap, man. They're so corrupt. They don't want to be public servants. They just want to serve themselves. And it disgusts me. And it's really a bipartisan effort of corruption. It really is. And self-serving garbage. So look, I think Hawley's actually serious about this because he's doing what he can. He's really trying to maneuver in a way that could get enough lawmakers on board to finally pass this legislation. I just think it's going to be an uphill battle. And you look at the current makeup of Congress, it doesn't look like this bill is really going to head anywhere. But it is drawing attention to a very real problem in our political system. And if we keep fighting and if we keep working with members of Congress who are willing to chip away at this system of gross corruption, maybe one day we will get a bill like that passed. But right now, there's too many corrupt people, too many self-serving people in Congress. I don't think it stands a chance. We'll see what happens. We'll keep you updated as this story develops. For now, though, let's take a break and come right back. We'll talk a little bit about a statement made by Scott Bessent that he immediately walked back, mostly because of political ramifications. Deb Long has an interesting theory here about Trump's, trade war with Canada. Anna, do you think Trump's obsession with tariffing Canada so high has to do with him trying to put his boot on our neck to ruin our economy and have us join the United States? Or is he just an actual taco? I forget what taco stands for. But anyway, I really don't think Trump is serious about having Canada join the United States. I don't. And I know Trump says a lot of things and he actually means it. I don't think that there's a genuine effort. It's going to ruin our economy, okay? Like it's going to be devastating for American consumers if Canada is literally slapped with 35% tariffs on their exports to the United States. So we're so dependent on Canada for oil, like insanely dependent on Canada for oil. Our refineries cannot refine the oil that we drill here in the United States. Canada has more of an upper hand than you think. So I don't think that's what's at play. But I like that you're thinking outside the box. I actually want to read from Dark Skin Beach, who says, "Oh, it sounds so good to get a tan at the beach right now." Republican voters are waking up too. Don't underestimate them. Our politicians are. Yeah, you know what? I do want to make that point. That Gallup poll with 71% of Republicans claiming they support what Israel's doing was really depressing. But I don't even really know how accurate that is. I am seeing a huge split in the MAGA base in regard to Israel, and they're very vocal, and I think they're convincing more Republican voters to join them. And that makes me really happy. In fact, there was a viewer who had such a great comment. I hope I can find it. So someone wrote in and said, I'm a conservative and I don't watch Fox. I don't watch conservative media. I only watch, moderate or left-wing media for a specific reason. Damn, I wish I could find it. Basically, this person feels like they're more informed when they make an active effort to consume media from the other side of the political aisle. And you want to know something? I consume media across the political spectrum because I do think it makes me better informed. You should watch all media. I think you should have a healthy, diverse media diet because you will learn things that you otherwise wouldn't learn. You would get a perspective that you otherwise would never get. And I do think it just makes you more aware of what's actually happening in the country and around the world. Salt of the Union says, I don't know why other Middle Eastern and African countries don't understand they're next. It'll never be enough, meaning the expansion of Israel. Well, ask yourself why Syria was a proxy war. Ask yourself a lot of questions about various wars that the US is engaged in, especially in the Middle East. Want to read one comment before we go to our next story? Liberal prison guard writes in and says, Anna, I was told by my closest cousin, I was his best man, that I was stupid and listened to a bunch of propaganda and lies. I'm so glad I found this show. I am ostracized by my friends, family, and colleagues. Working for almost 30 years in law enforcement and corrections, I don't hear voices like TYT. Thanks for the truth. And Peaceful Best Dragon says, thank you for the contentious coverage of Gaza, the West Bank, Israel, Anna. I will be here every day with uncontrollable tears. I know I cried a lot today, actually, and a willingness to not look away. Peaceful, best sent out, and up always and always. Up always and always. Thank you so much for the comment. I appreciate that. All right, I gotta kind of address what Scott Bessent said recently during a Breitbart event, because he did say the quiet part out loud. Let's take a look.
I'm not sure when the distribution level date should be, whether should it be 30 and you can buy a house, should it be 60? But in a way, it is a backdoor for privatizing Social Security.
A backdoor to privatizing Social Security, something that is deeply unpopular with the American people. But Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, seems to have admitted out loud during a Breitbart event that there's a provision that was included in the so-called Big Beautiful Bill that's essentially a way of chipping away at Social Security or a backdoor to privatizing Social Security. So we looked into this because I wanted to know what it's really about, if there's any truth behind it. And I do think that there's a potential issue here. So let's go through the details and the facts. So he was referring specifically to a new tax-deferred investment account for newborns and how they are the backdoor to privatizing Social Security. Now, how does that make any sense? I mean, it's just a new investment account rolled out by the government, tax-deferred. How is this gonna privatize Social Security? It's something entirely different. Well, it is separate. It doesn't touch Social Security, but it does do something in the long term. So what are these accounts? Well, the tax-deferred investment accounts allow parents to contribute up to $5,000 a year for their children. The accounts allow for penalty-free withdrawals after age 59. So that's when people begin to retire. So I guess this isn't like some education account. This isn't some savings account that's tax deferred, but kids or your children can access it once they're 18 and they can use it for anything. No. They can use it for anything, but in order to take the money out and not get penalized, they have to be at least 59 years old. Okay, interesting. The government will also contribute $1,000 to each baby born from 2025 to 2028. Are they not generous? Are they not generous? You've got that 3-year window. Just a one-time $1,000 payment to the account. Okay, great. So look, Bessent appears to think that this is a way to chip away at our Social Security system, which is partially funded, of course, through payroll taxes that employers pay, along with the Social Security taxes that we all pay when we get paid, right? Like when we get our paycheck, we see the stub. You can see how much of your income was contributed to our Social Security system. And I love that because I know that that money is going specifically to something I believe in and want to protect. It's not going to go to like the federal government, and then we're going to have this pathetic, corrupt Congress send our money to all sorts of greedy, self-interested corporations or to foreign governments. It goes straight to Social Security. Okay. Now, Howard Gleckman, and by the way, it is tax deferred. So let's say you're in a high tax bracket and you're looking for a way to lower your income bracket. These types of accounts help people do that, right? You can do it through contributing the maximum amount to a traditional 401k. And this is just another account where it's tax deferred. You don't pay taxes going in, but when you take money out, that's when you do pay taxes. Now, Howard Gleckman, a senior fellow at the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center, says, on one hand, what they are doing is they are making Social Security less solvent and a riskier proposition for people. On the other hand, the Treasury Secretary seems to be musing out loud about the idea of beginning to privatize the system. So look, I don't think that this account on its own is going to make Social Security less solvent. I do think that members of Congress have engaged in activity that eventually will make Social Security less solvent. I think we need to significantly raise the Social Security tax cap, because after a certain amount of income, you no longer get taxed. Wealthy people do not get taxed for Social Security. If you lift that cap, we're not going to have a problem. But Congress refuses, Republicans especially, refuse to ever lift that cap to what is necessary to keep Social Security solvent for the long term. And by the way, it is a politically unpopular move to privatize Social Security, which is why Bessent really did say the quiet part out loud. The idea was politically unpopular and it contributed to historic losses for Republicans in the 2006 midterm elections, giving Democrats control of both chambers of Congress and largely ending the Bush administration's legislative agenda. And thank God for that, which is why Treasury Secretary Bessent decided to walk back his statement. Take a look.
It was ridiculous. I was giving an interview and I was talking about the $1,000 baby bonds that every American citizen, every newborn is going to get. The Democrats hate this program because it brings capitalism and markets to every American, not just their constituents at the upper end, and over time, the compounding is going to be an incredible supplement to Social Security, not a replacement. It is a complement. And what I said was Social Security will continue as it is. It is intact. Everyone will get their check every month.
Okay, so what's really going on here? I do think that people like Bessent absolutely want to chip away at Social Security. These accounts don't do that. But I think what they're hoping to do in the long term is garner enough support for getting rid of Social Security. And the way you can do that is ensuring that Americans are essentially putting the onus on themselves to save for retirement. That clears employers from having to pay payroll taxes through Social Security or to Social Security. And so if you have a giant account that you are fortunate enough to have enough disposable income to contribute $5,000 a year to, well, by the time your child is ready to retire or is getting close to retirement, is at age 59, well, then they're probably going to care less about Social Security. They're going to have a different account they can lean on. Of course, it's an account that they fully funded, their parents fully funded on their own, and they got a one-time $1,000 payment from the government if they were lucky and were able to open the account in the 3-year span where the government is offering that $1,000 payment. I think that's what Bessent was trying to say. I think that's overly hopeful. Most Americans do not have the disposable income to contribute $5,000 a year tax deferred to this account. And for those who are fortunate enough to have that, great, wonderful. I actually don't really have a problem with this account. And I don't think that the account is going to do what Bessent thinks it's going to do, because he's out of touch and he doesn't understand what the economic situation is for the vast majority of Americans. The reason why Social Security is popular, the reason why people want to protect it, is because it is not tied to the risk of the stock market and because it is a guaranteed income that retired people in this country will get and are entitled to because they've paid into the system. Bonus episode is next. I'll see you there.